All right, thank you so much for staying with Daybreak. The conversation had already begun even before we get into it because it's a very dicey topic, and that's why we want to hear your views as well. 22422 is the SMS line. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, at Wahiga Mwaura. We are asking you on Twitter, are we making progress as a society in the fight against sexual offences? We'd like to know what you think. That's a question we're asking you today. Are we making progress as a society in the fight against sexual offences? Note we've said sexual offences, not on either gender, just sexual offences.
That's right.
Generally.
Do you
Are
feel
we making progress?
It's easier to report? Do you feel the law protects you? Do you feel that sort of those who should enforce the law are more open, you know, when you go to a police station and so forth? What do you feel? And of course, if people are falsely accused, do you feel that they have a chance to defend themselves? Are we making progress as a society? 22422 is the SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. And at Trevor Mbija, at Wahiga Mwaura, let's use some of those handles. Let's start talking about that, which we are getting to shortly. But before that, I want to tell you a little bit about what you find in your papers today.
Should we introduce our guest first?
Go ahead.
Like all right, I'll start from my immediate left, and Elvis Abenga. Thank you so much for coming through. He's a family lawyer as well. He'll be speaking to us about the legal basis of all these issues, the offences and recourse, if there is any. Followed by Vivian Mwende, also a legal counsel with FIDA. Thank you so much for coming in. And then we have someone who needs no introduction. Wanjeri Nehru, thank you for coming in as well. I know you don't like the name, the word activist.
No, I love the word activist. We demonize it, but it's who we are.
It's a noble cause.
Brilliant. And then we have Dr. Stella Bosire, medical doctor. Thank you so much.
The reason he made the headlines for other reasons, but that's not why we
are not discussing that.
County matters, but that's not what we are here to do.
Takes a hard pass on that one.
Why we are here today. Good. Pass.
All right, hard pass.
Okay.
All right, let's start with the front page of the Standard. Just run you through what's happening in the newspapers before we get into our discussion proper. Patient suffers, county workers begin go slow. Day characterized by placard carrying, health workers staging protest, and patients waiting for hours to access medical care in county hospitals. That story continues on page 4. It's something we've been following very closely for you. And also on the front page of the Standard is how rich criminals buy police protection. 19 is the security number of administration police officers assigned to guard drug trafficking suspect Ali Punjani during the raid at his house. So security apparatus are dogged by a series of events that show insiders were recruited to support multi-billion shilling criminal enterprises. That story continues on page 6. City tycoon disowned farms of 41 billion shillings tax fraud suit. Embattled billionaire Humphrey Kariuki has disassociated himself from management of Africa Spirits and Farm at the center of the suspected 41 billion tax fraud. Of course, he says the allegations are baseless. Let's see what else is going on here. Not on the back page. I know the back page is your favorite, but I'll skip that one. Suspects fault EACC in graft case. That's on page 3. A businessman suspected to be involved in a corruption scandal at state agency wants detectives barred from searching his house. And also there's a story there about a woman who's been arraigned for possession of a firearm. At the same time, this is a story we'd like to get our panelists' views on. A man who's 35 has been hospitalized after a wife bites off his lower lip. But before we get into that, you want to go through the nation?
Good. Let me just briefly, and then we come back to this story. There's been a lot of complaints that the media focus on politics. So it's good to see the Daily Nation have led with a different story. River of Poison. Nairobi teams up with leading scientists to expose environmental scandal. And remember, we also did a story like this about a month ago, Enoch Sikolia. You can find that on YouTube. But, you know, should you grab the Daily Nation this morning, the story says that you may not know it, but water is one of Nairobi's most scarce and valuable resources. Yet pollution and mismanagement have changed it from a source of life to a cause of death. And there's a picture there of the Nairobi River and, of course, the buildings that are, or the homes that are around it. An aerial shot as it sneaks through the Dandora suburb. And when you turn to page 8, 9, and 10, you will get a better picture of some of the diseases that you might contract as a result of drinking or taking products that maybe have, you know, been quite close to this particular water. Even some of the vegetables that are grown alongside that river as well. So it's titled Sad Story of the River of Poison. Wow, that's very strong language. Unable to wash away the spell that's been cast on it upstream. So page 8, 9, and 10, and you get finer details around that. While Cardinal John Njue on page 3 of the Daily Nation links immorality and drug abuse to the education system. Okay, so he says that the rising cases of violence, sexual immorality, drug abuse, depression, suicides, and parents not listening to young people are a result of waning values in the country's education system. Wow. Okay.
No comment.
Okay, all right, that's very interesting. And of course, on page 5, tycoon's wife, 2 foreigners arrested in renewed fight against narcotics. A picture there of the wife of Mr. Ali Punjani, Karki Sushmi Jha, and other suspects from Nepal who are found in the house of the Mombasa tycoon. And one last story, Trevor, before I hand back to you. This is on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Uhuru Ruto backers differ on Building Bridges initiative. Differences of opinion between leaders allied to the president and to the deputy president over the Building Bridges initiative continue to intensify, threatening to not only tear the ruling party further apart, but also scuttle the reforms initiative.
Did you see his tweet?
This morning, Deputy President William Ruto,
2.4 million
please
followers,
share it with our panel and our viewers. We'll
have that on your screen later on, but it's on a headline on the Star which says Ruto allies plot to scuttle Uhuru Raila referendum, and then somewhere William Ruto, doctor, says this is what constitutes fake news. I know it is difficult, but newspapers should try selling without the Ruto mention. Please, tafadhali, woye.
Woye. And this is not the first time he's called sections of the media fake news, following the narrative of a certain president. Okay, so it's on the screen.
Let's put that on the screen to show you what it says. Yeah, so that's exactly what it's talking about.
Posted at
about 6 hours ago. That was late last night.
Yes. Yeah. No, 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Why about 1 a.m. or 12:30?
Yep. So he wasn't asleep.
Okay.
Sorry for another day.
Take us back to that story we're talking. Very, very concerning here.
Page 3 of the Standard. This is a concerning story, just like you said. A man who's 35 years old has been hospitalized after a wife bites off his lower lip. He says that this was about a standoff because he refused to give her fare to travel up country. But he also further says that they've been married for 4 years and the wife has been subjecting him and 4 of their children to violence. So before we even get into the nitty-gritties of this, Elvis, I'd just like to start from there. What kind of legal recourse does he have?
Okay.
Does this become a word of his word against hers?
No. First of all, that's a criminal offense under the penal code. It's assault, yeah? And the kind of harm that has been occasioned there would potentially classify as grievous harm. So there is the the recourse to the criminal courts, and of course now with the recently passed Victim Protection Act, him as the victim has the right to participate and even seek compensation within the criminal process, something that hasn't been there before but now is there, courtesy of the Victim Protection Act and Participation Act. And apart from that, he still retains the remedy under the civil law process, where he could ask again he could sue his wife for battery in that sense, and then still get compensation.
But the fact that she was asking for fare from him, surely how much will he get out of it?
Well,
I think he might have been the breadwinner, you know.
The thing here is whether, the injury that he actually suffered from, not as much as the reason why he was injured. It's pretty much the nature of the injury, not the justification of why the violence was meted against him as such,
And Vivian, I know you deal with the families a lot, and also this sort of incidents comes up a lot, but the main concern for people has always been, now if this is someone who you call your wife, then you take them to court. What kind of relationship comes out of that from there? Because there's an impact to the family. Exactly, you're airing your dirty laundry. He's a man. It's just a lot of things come into play.
And you see, this is the kind of problems we have, Trevor. And let me start by saying that violence is unacceptable. It is against the law and it's a criminal offense. Be it any gender. It could be a man, could be a woman, despite. And no one is supposed to suffer violence, whether in marriage, outside marriage, in a relationship, or without having any relationship in that matter. And therefore, this brings the issue of morality also back to the family. That is why the protection against domestic violence came in, probably because the issues of domestic violence in family, in marriages were happening. And of course, we expect that the family is going to be divided. We are going to be having both sides. On the side, probably they go at home, and this side, the other family is blaming the in-laws. This, of course, is expected for it to affect the family. But again, we come back to the morals and the root cause of all this. And I know Joy has spoken about it, but again, immorality in families, and again, of course, we expect is going to affect families. So therefore, here we are seeking assistance again from the church. We are seeking assistance from counselors and psychologists to assist families. You are not supposed to accept violence in either case. Whether it's going to divide your family or not, it is unacceptable, because these children you have in that home, they are watching you as a family.
So do you think that's where the missing gap is in the terms of leadership in the church? Because when we were growing up, this wasn't that common. Either it wasn't that common, or
it wasn't
we didn't know
reported.
about it. It wasn't reported.
People were involved. Your pastor was involved. Your neighbor was involved. Nowadays, there's no nyumba kumi. You don't know who is your neighbor. Your pastor really just wants to see you on Sunday. Your psychologist, you have to book an appointment. Your counselor wants, and you have to pay for it. Again, people don't have that money. So, of course, there's no that access. There's no that involvement in your life. Again, people have been hiding in families. A lot of violence is hiding in families. Reason being, they don't want this lady or this man in this case does not want to express to other men what he is suffering. So it is also good to speak about it. That's
actually what I wanted to ask Wanjeri. Is it possible that he tried to complain to people around him, it's hell in our house, and maybe the response would have been, Ebu chunga nyumba yako, that sort of attitude. And it's possible that some might wake up this morning, read this story and think that, and not look at it with concern, have the opinions that he should have been in charge, quote unquote. What are your thoughts when you think of such attitudes?
Unfortunately, what we find is that most men, even when they undergo violence of any sort, they tend to be victimized even when they're the victims. This is a societal thing where men are supposed to be macho and strong, and you're not supposed to tolerate anything, happening to you. But you find a lot of abuse happening in our homes also is directed towards men. But what strikes me in this story is not that it is a woman who beat the man's lip off. I'm thinking, was this woman mentally disturbed? Because at the beginning of the story, just down there, they say that when some neighbors informed him that his wife had attempted suicide and he went to the river and things like that, by the time somebody starts to think or become suicidal, there are chances that this person has mental health issues. So the 4 years he's talking about of subjecting him to this violence, was it because she was mentally unwell and then went untreated and it was not recognized? So there are many things that we need to look at when we are looking at violence within the homes. I agree with her when she says in the past the community was involved. If your parents or people around you would have any issue in their home, Wazee would come in and there would be a meeting between this side of the family and this side of the family, and things would be sorted out and issues would be discussed. Even the church, yes, was involved. But these days it doesn't work like that. Even in the modern marriages, if I call them that, when we're having issues with our spouses, our families are hardly involved. And when they're involved, the situation has become so bad, we're either at the brink of divorce or somebody's totally in a state where they suffered from the experience. So we don't involve the people around us who love us, who are our family members or our support system and community in solving family disputes. We left that to just the two people in the house. Yeah.
Dr. Stella Busire, let me ask you this. What do you think are the warning signs that what was initially a domestic dispute is now getting out of hand?
I think there are a couple of things that come out in this story. There are children involved. There's a mental health issue for the woman, and then there's the issue of the man. And while my panelists are discussing about morality, I step back and question around. Why are we guided by moral values within our society, and yet we have laws and regulations which have been set, which encompass some of these good values and norms that we have? This is a criminal case. It's a direct criminal case, number one. But then even while it's a criminal case, as you're prosecuting such a case, there'll be medical doctors who will do a mental state examination, particularly for the respondents in the case, right? Who will be able to state categorically if this patient is not actually in the right state of mind. The thing about such cases, and one of the challenges that we face, particularly around men, is the reporting. This is a man who's been, quote unquote, according to the story, in a 4-year relationship where there has been violence. statistics state that 55 to 60% of men who face any form of violence do not report, against about 40 to 44% of women. Why? Stigma issues, right? And that's where the morality issue, that's why I question the morality issue. You'll go to the wazees, watakwambia aje, oh, men are not beaten by women. And yet,
that is unheard of. Yeah.
That's unheard of, right? And the next time you're coming, you're having a surgical case of a person where we have to reattach back the lip. Or we have had issues of men whose private parts have been beaten off. So again, is to be able to start looking at what are these root issues which we are not addressing while we're just looking at the bigger picture, and also discriminating against men and demonizing them when they express their emotions. I think that's a very wrong strategy within the society. And even when you talk about the place of religion, I think we also have to be very careful when we bring in religion, because one of the things that we have to understand is that even religion has been used as a tool to silence victims of violence, both men and women, has been used to actually propagate violence, both in all the genders. And then that means that then what is that one neutral body that we can actually use to be able to kind of like normalize or kind of like
equalize society,
buffer the society, and that's the law.
Let me ask you this. Cardinal John Jewett thinks the law is not enough. He actually says it's our education system. He says our education system is to blame, or the results of waning values in societies because of our education system. Do you agree with him?
I have a quote that says, man was not meant for the law, but the law was meant for man. And the law is
so who's the master? Is it the law that's the master of a man, or man is the master over the law?
Man being the master of the law, the man is the one who determines what laws come into place. And laws are living documents, right? They are not static. Wakili has discussed about the Evidence Act. It's changes, they are dynamic, and they're dynamic when they're influenced by what is happening. If you look at our laws about 10 years ago, we didn't even have strong laws around social media, right? About protection of people around social media, around bullying.
Around data.
You know. Right now we are having, because it keeps changing. So it's very important for us to reflect on that. The other important thing we also have to remember, that this country is not a religious country. We are a secular country constitutionally. That means also, even how we view issues as a country, we have to be really guided by the Constitution, which is a supreme guide or law that governs us as a country. Now, when we bring in the issues of religion, the different sectors, they're actually what they're meant to do is strengthen what exactly exists. Literally saying is that the law says violence is a crime. So how does the religion come in and strengthen that notion around violence in any form of violence or any gender is a crime? So I actually find that it's short-sighted for, with all due respect, for everyone to actually say that our problem is our education system and our laws. I don't think that's a problem. The problem around the detrimental issues that we're seeing around the society is that when religion becomes naive, number one, when it refuses to actually face issues head on. Like, for example, the Catholic Church. I was born and raised a Catholic, right? When we discuss issues around comprehensive sexuality education and you want to bring issues of immorality and young people having early sexual debut, the question that you ask yourself is, you're the same people who are opposing this. And then you come and say that young people are having sexual debut very early. So what is it that you stand for? Where is the balance? The balance then is to ask, can we be able to provide our young people with comprehensive information? Yeah. So do not, when you're pointing one blame to the law, for pointing at you.
Okay. And Wanjeri, I'd like to hear what you think on this. Is it an issue of a moral fabric decay or lack of support system? Because there are people who say, don't take constructive criticism from someone who's not constructed anything. If you go to your family and you talk about the issues in your own household, the first thing you'll be told is, cheza chini, there are people who have it worse than you. And then now you don't have that support system. And we have this society that has almost demonized people who want to walk away. If you walk away, the blame will be either on you, you're not strong enough. So is it a moral fabric decay or lack of support system?
I think it's a moral fabric decay. I do not entirely agree with him when he says it's our education system, because how come things are worse now than they used to be before? And we went through this other than now that they're introducing this thing that we don't know what it is, called CBC, you know. If you look at us who went through 844 or those who went through the other system before, how come things are worse now? Is it because there was less reportage then? I don't think so. Things have changed. We have technology. Our children are accessing information much earlier than we did. When we were growing up, we were told if a boy touches you, you get pregnant. And this you live in Nairobi, and you're in class 7 and class 8, and you were terrified of being touched by a boy, you couldn't even rub shoulders because you're told you're going to get pregnant. That was, call it naivety, call it lack of information. But right now, a child who's much, much younger than that is going to tell you what sex is. Okay, so are we moving with the times as a society? Are we getting ourselves in spaces where, as parents, we're able to sit down with our children and tell them A, B, C, D is wrong? Now, when you shift it to the education system, what does it really mean? Are we saying it is the teacher's responsibility to teach our children about sexual matters? Those things should be discussed first in the home. In my home, I was lucky enough, I learned a lot of what it is that I know today from the household. But a lot of parents don't, one, have the time to sit down and do this. I know as a parent of a 15-year-old that the first time I had to sit down and think of talking to her and about these issues, I first called my sister and said, do you want to do this? And my sister was like, you know what? It's your duty and you have to do it. But I keep telling her, you'll get there also and you'll feel the same thing. It's not easy, but sitting them down is important. My 11-year-old and I have also had that conversation. It is not that they don't know. Another thing that we need to be very careful about, and maybe you can call me paranoid as a parent, what are our children watching on our TVs?
It is good to be paranoid.
We did.
You're allowed to.
People think I'm paranoid, but there are things I do not allow my children to watch. And if, for instance, a movie comes out and it's the hype and it has to be seen and they say it's a general exhibition or they give the age limit, I go and watch it first before I allow them to watch.
Wow.
I know these cartoon things and all that, like they don't even watch Nickelodeon. Because you're going to find things that are age 9.
But when they ask you, Mom, why are you watching this thing and you're saying it's bad for us?
No, I watch in their absence. Like when, for instance, these movies come out, you'll find me in the movie halls by myself, figuring out what it is my children will be taught by watching this movie. Because they will learn more.
I mean, they can always access that content from the neighbors, from their friends.
Yes, but by the time they go to the neighbors and their friends, I have not given them that access first. Okay, you can't entirely protect them. But you find that some of this, even on Netflix and things like that, some of this programming that our children are subjected to, are introducing our children to things that are so confusing to them at a very early age. There's some programming on Netflix and especially Nickelodeon where the main characters, for instance, they have boyfriends and girlfriends and they're 7 and they're 6 years old, and then they're planning and plotting how we are going to go after that person so that we keep our boyfriend. These are 6-year-old, 7-year-old kids.
Standard one.
Yes. So if my children are watching that and I have not prepared them about what messaging, in the Western world, maybe it's common that, oh, mommy, I have a boyfriend, daddy, I have a boyfriend, or oh, mommy, I'm gay, or things like that. It is common there, but here we need to have a conversation with our children and introduce it to them in a manner that they'll be able to understand it and accept it better.
From you first, before they access it anywhere else.
Gives it to them.
Which is why you should watch Viewsasa. I've been itching to jump in on this.
But for me, Vivian, what I'm wondering is, at this point, when it gets to this point, is ADR an alternative? Because people always say alternative dispute resolution can work for this one, or this one you just go the legal way.
Trevor, we cannot sit and discuss on violence issues. Why did you hit me? Why did you rape me? Because again, that falls again alongside sexual offences. It also falls against the penal code. We cannot sit down and have ADR on these matters. That is unacceptable. And that is why I tend to concur even with my panelists when they say that at times even the church, at times even the people whom we think the place we are running to, what they try to do is to have you sit down, the perpetrator plus the victim. Let us have a sit down. We discuss as to why you guys were fighting. So that is unacceptable. We need to tell these people that you have a right to report, and this is a criminal offense. This should be reported and it should be investigated. And let me just add something about what the panelists have said. 2 things. One, as a country, I know we're having this discussion on this table, but as a country, are we making the right front even to the international bodies? Because we may discuss it in Kenya, we may make it a priority, but also we need to make it a priority even outside, because these norms, this immorality, others are coming from outside, and the influential nature that is coming from the Western countries. And I know out of the Me Too movement, I know Wahiga, you had mentioned it, the Me Too movement that came about, it came with a lot of force. in that last year on the 20th of November last year, there was the first resolution of the sexual harassment at the UN General Assembly, that the first time they sat down and they said, well, that this now it's becoming an issue. The reason being the Me Too movement. So in Kenya, are we having a Me Too movement? The men are saying that. I did a sit down last weekend, this same place, this same studio, and most of the men were talking about also men are being victimized. But is there another man who is going to come and join and say, me too? Then we have 5, me too, 10, me too. That force is going to influence this talk. That force is going to ensure that even the international bodies are ready to have a sit down and talk about it. Why women are being spoken about in terms of sexual violence, in terms of sexual offenses, and in terms of sexual abuses, because they're having me too moment.
So women need to speak out.
They need to speak out.
Need to speak out. Okay, we had you for a break, but I just want to get this from Elvis. Elvis, this man is probably, the relatives are probably around him right now telling him go to court. Or maybe, I don't know if the DPP will, or the prosecutor will just take up the case on this. But the person might be asking themselves, do I really want to relive that trauma? Go to court, have to explain what happened, be cross-examined, etc. At what point do you decide, you know what, I'm not going to court. It's going to be too much trauma for me. She's gone. Let her stay out. Let me bring up my family. Where do you find that balance? How do you, if you are the lawyer in this matter, and the person says, you know, this is too much, too hard, I'm not ready. Yeah. You know, how do you navigate?
If I was his lawyer,
like that, yes,
I'd advise for counseling.
First?
Yeah, because.
And for how long?
Because, like, the process can be traumatizing through court, especially because criminal proceedings are public. Counseling does work, and that social support throughout the entire process. We can't just say that you're just doing it before the process. You need someone to walk with this person throughout, even up to when the judgment is being delivered and after. Because true, I've had clients like that who either do not want to proceed with matters or drop matters midway because it's just too heavy on them, and they lack that fabric to support them through the process. And I guess that goes as well to a question you earlier asked, whether it's just morality or lack of social support. I would say it's also lack of social support.
All right. Yeah. Okay, we have to take a quick break. When we come back now, we start that discussion on sexual offenses and the law. We asked you a question earlier on. Let's bring it up before we get, but there's a lot of feedback also.
Yeah, we're already getting feedback.
Let's get some feedback first, and then we'll ask you the question of the day again, because you're already responding to it. Let's put them up at Citizen TV Kenya. Trevor Mbija, Engineer Lazaro says, let the truth set us free. Sexual offenses of late have become the secret weapon of divorces. Women use it to bring down men. Police must be restrained on how to handle such grave cases without malice.
Okay, it's gone very specific to one gender.
Okay. We'll find out what our panelists think about that.
Ali Daib, 7 sex predators are on the rise because somehow they dodge justice.
Okay, so it's a justice system that has loopholes.
Somehow they found a way to dodge justice.
What else is saying here? Elijah says, nope, the fight against sexual offenses can never be won when one party is condemned entirely at the expense of the other. Men are always punished as women escape the wrath of the law. It is a high time legislation is aligned for both genders.
Wow, okay. Men really giving their views here, Trevor. And D by 11, we are definitely making progress, but the only problem is getting a balance between proving beyond reasonable doubt for those who have been falsely accused. The bar to determine guilt should be raised higher. Okay?
Beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, let's see what else is saying here. Joe Ondulo says, no. What we are currently doing wrong is to create more legislation instead of inculcating good and acceptable morals. This is compounded by absentee parents, hence imagining that rules will solve the problems. Never.
Okay, let's take that break. When we come back, we've got lots to discuss with our panelists here. We'll be looking at misconceptions around rape. We'll get their views on that. We'll be looking at defilement and understanding, and also that controversial phrase, rape culture.
And
what does that phrase do? And evidence as well.
Threshold.
And someone has asked,
by Lazaro,
should the bar be raised higher?
That's a question.
All right.
And we also like to continue responding to that question. The question is Kenya making progress in the fight against sexual offenses? That's what we're asking you this morning. Is Kenya making progress in the fight against sexual offenses? We'd like to know what you think. 22422 at Trevor Mbija, #Daybreak. See you in just a bit.